The Witch Queen campaign experience is like nothing else that came before it, as it is an actual campaign with missions and a story. I know, truly a revolutionary concept. However, because of these changes, this video became a much larger undertaking than I first imagined. I've gone ahead and restructured my content release schedule. This first part will cover my post Beyond Light experience, along with some missions of the Season of the Wish. If you don't care about my thoughts on those, go ahead and click on the Arrival chapter in order to go straight to my commentary on the first part of the Witch Queen. The following parts will release every other day. At the end of that, I will release one entire video that will act as the final cut. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Back at the helm, we talk to Marasov and pick up some wish tokens. I'd been passively completing whatever challenges were presented with their associated quests, so this was a nice reward to pick up. These wish tokens become incredibly important later on. Over the next day, I did a little bit of research on the current going-ons in Destiny, but the only lasting discovery is a third-party app called Destiny Item Manager. I was told about it earlier, but it wasn't until now that I explored it, and wow, is it a game changer. Inventory management actually becomes manageable, and being able to move items in and out of your vault while you are anywhere is the biggest quality of life change that you could ever ask for. I cannot imagine playing this game without Dim ever again. Well, I can, but I would not want to. Destiny's menus are quite obviously designed to also work with consoles, which means that they are basically console first, and that limits the space the UI can explore. Should all of this be in-game? Sure, but it's not like the in-game information is bad. It's just not as good as Dim. Being able to access your vault from anywhere is probably something that should just be added in the game though. I also took a trip to the tower and cleared out my postmaster, vault, and did some overall general housekeeping. From the terminal, I went ahead and picked up all the exotic bows using my ciphers because I was capped at the max, and I had to pick up the quest from Boat Zur and my seasonal pass. I picked up all of the bows because I like bows, I don't know. Since I was now a Shadebinder, I went ahead and equipped the Stasis exotic bow, the Verglas Curve. Verglas Curve? Verglas Curve? I'll go with Verglas Curve. Sounds the best, I guess. Figuring out how this bow worked was quite the discovery. After killing an enemy, you gain a stack of Hail Barrage. This makes your next hipfire shot fire an Ice Arrow. This can stack up to 5. If you shatter one of the stasis crystals and it kills an enemy, then it refreshes a stack of Hail Barrage. Managing your Hail Barrage stacks by killing enemies with regular and ice arrows creates a small gameplay loop in of itself and was pretty fun. I also decided to leave behind the double primary lifestyle and looked at my strongest special ammo weapons. This was a harsh language grenade launcher and some shotgun. Unfortunately, the perk rolls on them were not good, but that was not something I was even paying attention to in the first place. Empire Hunt, the Dark Priestess, has us going after Kritis, Aramis's right-hand Elixni. You know, after the campaign is already completed and we already took care of Aramis. Anyways, unlike Aramis, who sought power, she seeks understanding in the darkness. Kritis does some stuff as we make our way to her, but to be honest, I'm bored with the Aramis plotline and it doesn't really matter all that much. Plot B with Elsie Bray and her grandfather is so much more interesting and relevant to the story overall. It's really a shame that they didn't make this the focus of the campaign and just gave us a boring villain of the week in Aramis. We are taken into a Vex simulation created by Clovis Bray and are tested in our combat abilities. To upgrade or to not upgrade? I'm sure this isn't a tough choice for more seasoned players, but to me, I don't have enough materials to justify the upgrade, especially since the Stasis Fellwinter's Helm build I was on was kind of too strong for most content I was facing. If you don't know, Fellwinter's Helm exotic perk is Warlord's End, and it reads, powered melee final blows create a burst of energy that weakens nearby targets. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the radius of the burst and the length of the weakening effect. I hate how vague all the effects are, but luckily, Dim has community insights that are infinitely more helpful. Powered melee and finisher kills disorient and debuff enemies in a given radius around the target, increasing damage received by them by 30%. That 30% weaken is pretty much what this whole build is about. Screen becomes fully blackened for 7.5 seconds upon getting hit by the debuff before gradually fading away over the next 7.5 seconds. HUD remains unobstructed. I assume that this is PvP related. The debuff duration and application radius are dependent on enemy rank. Miners, 15 meter radius, 10-second duration. Elites and players, 20 minute. Oh my god, it's so over. 15-second duration. Should I cut that? Ugh. Mini bosses and bosses, 25-meter radius, and 20-second duration. That's actually kind of crazy that, the higher it goes, the more it scales. But I guess that makes sense. Finishers increase the debuff duration by 5 seconds up to the maximum of 20 seconds. Applying weaken to the target extends the debuff's duration. I really like the idea of this, but there was not a single enemy that I ever needed to weaken up to this point, which only justified my decision in not upgrading it to Masterwork just yet. Nonetheless, I used the D2 Armor Picker website to sort out the rest of my build. Of course, I didn't know how to do all of this by myself and referenced a few videos. The most useful of them all was one by Mr. Fruit where Dado teaches him how to make an endgame build. I feel like this one video unlocked my third eye when it came to how armor works, minus the mods, because that entire system is completely not even relevant to me at all. I had no idea how it works, and I was interested at the time, but trying to watch videos on the mod system, I'm like, bro, I don't got time for this. I got a campaign to go through. Anyways, I included the link in the description. Just remember to unequip your fragments so it doesn't mess up your stat distribution. I almost messed up on this. For my mods, since they didn't really go over in the video, I only used enough material to get enough energy on my equipment to get the stat bonuses, as that is probably the most relevant of them all. I was careful with my limited resources. Great line, good job me. I also remembered to put on concussive dampener on my chest piece, since I remembered that from the chat and the Garden of Salvation raid. Unfortunately, none of my pieces were all that great though, so I wasn't able to hit 100 resilience even with mods. At least I wasn't facing anything at this point that needed it. I also went ahead and equipped the discipline mod to my ghost as well. Apparently, stats are divided into top half and bottom half when it comes to how they are distributed. By having the discipline mod on, the stats should then focus less on intellect and strength and more on resilience and recovery. However, in reality, it always ends up going to mobility. I didn't get my armor and build sorted out for no reason. My goal was to attempt my first ever legendary Lost Sector, because I was working on clearing out the season pass tasks at the time. I hovered around the 1820 power level, so I was either -9 or -10 power when attempting this activity. Remember, I'm gaining +9/10 from the season artifact. I didn't read any of the buffs or surges because I wasn't all that interested in them at this point in time. So the equipment lock screen basically jump scared me. The first room of Skydock 4 had an unstoppable Incendior. At first I thought it was an overload champ, so I shot some rockets at it, but once I saw it was an unstoppable champion, I switched to my bow. It did take me a couple of arrows before I realized I had to actually fully draw my bow in order to apply that unstoppable shot. Once I figured that out though, the champ went down without much fuss. In order to proceed, I had to drop down a short distance. This second room was just a hallway, but it had both a barrier and unstoppable champion. I wasted my time by trying to use the heliocentric to stun the champ before switching to the rocket, but at this distance, the barrier champ would regen far too fast. So instead of running into the brick wall over and over again, I just left the Lost Sector and switched my loadout. It's been a while, but it's good to have the Wish Ender back in my hands. Unfortunately, artifact buffs don't stack with weapons with innate anti-champion properties. This sucks, but I can understand how it could easily get out of hand. So, in order to stun the unstoppable, I sent out my Cold Snap Grenade in order to apply the shatter effect onto the champion. Just let me take care of it with 3 shots of my rocket launcher. I try to knock out the champs in the second room from this ledge as we drop down, but because I'm both at -10 power and without tier 10 resilience, I get deleted almost instantly. After reviving, the unstoppable decided to jump up to where I wanted to play cover and almost destroyed me. Luckily, I had my melee to stun the champion. With the Wish Ender, the barrier champion was free low, but I don't really like hanging out this far back and playing so passively, but getting any closer to the champion would not have really made this go any faster, especially since I'm using a bow. The first unstoppable champion decided to jump up and stick itself in a corner all by itself, so I went ahead and just deleted it. I used my super to clear out most of the ads while doing a good amount of damage to the boss. However, this Colossus is probably the tankiest enemy I've faced thus far. Luckily, this arena has plenty of cover, so I can just knock it at it from a distance. All that is left for me is to collect my loot. For my first ever solo Legend Lost Sector, I am rewarded with the Boots of the Assembler. Cool. To be honest, it wasn't that bad, but because I didn't know what to expect, I took it pretty slow. As long as you stunned a champion and then delete them instantly, there wasn't anything else that was really a threat. I made some progress in the past and picked up some exotic engrams. From them, I got the Arbalist, Karnstein Gloves, Hardlight, and Suros Regime. Arbalist had anti-barrier rounds, but I was already on the Wishender, so I was basically never going to use this weapon. The Hardlight sounded interesting since it had over-penetrating ricochet rounds, but with that gimmick, it was probably more fun than good. However, it is also not a bow, so I'm probably never using it either.
I must admit,
I woke up the next day and started recording at Zur because I thought that this exotic engram was gonna be a banger. But instead, it was only the Prospector. I don't know, maybe this gun is actually broken, but I would be the last person to know. I also picked up the other exotics because legendary shards are getting deprecated in the final shape. And when I switch to another class in the future, it would be useful to have some starting gear. These exotics were the Prometheus Lens Fusion Rifle, Skull of the Dire Ahamkara helmet for my Warlock, the Eternal Warrior helmet for the Titan, and the Shinobu's Vow Gauntlet for the Hunter. After that, I returned back to Europa in order to finish up the post-Melnight Night missions. Of course, instead of teleporting us into a mission, I'm forced to waste a few minutes by running into the Crux of Darkness. This mission just consists of killing a bunch of underpower adds, so it's not exciting. They try to make it harder by spawning in an Overload champion, but I refuse to believe that these have the same health pool as the ones in the Nightfalls or legendary Lost Sectors. Although I killed myself with my rocket launcher at the second Crux, I obtained the key anyways and meet up with Elsie Bray in the Perdition Lost Sector. This room is small, but it has some more golden exos. We use the skeleton key. Elsie fills us in. Her mother used to tell Anna that she was adopted, rather than letting her know her true heritage of being a Bray. However, those Bray traits still showed up in her through her destructive tendencies. I don't know what those tendencies are, but I'm pretty sure every single child rolls with the destructive tendencies origin perk. Of course, Elsie was able to realize that cruelty was a learned behavior and not genetic. Elsie tried to manipulate Anna by using her troubled past, but this only led to Anna succumbing to the temptation of the darkness. This led Elsie to kill her own sister. Truly a tragic moment, but it's ruined by the fact that we're in a different timeline where she's alive. If she succumbs to the darkness again, Elsie can just fuck off to a different timeline unless something is stopping her from doing so. I've been paying attention though, and I don't think that's ever been a limitation that we've been told about. Of course, even if the timeline machine was destroyed, the fact that such a feat is possible still kind of diffuses the stakes, at least to me as a player. She's a robot, so she's gonna live forever. We're a guardian. We're going to live forever. So, surely, at some point, that technology will be recreated by someone, humanity or not, in one timeline or another. I know I said I was gonna skip this timeline stuff, but I can't help but talk about it when this game keeps on bringing it up. Time travel always reduces the tension and stakes present in a story, even if you're able to make it work. Blah. We return to the campfire. Elsie is lost in thought, but lets us know that she sent a message to Anna. Of course, in order to actually advance to part 3 of the Born in Darkness quest, we are forced to waste time by killing ads with stasis. Cool. We find ourselves in the Bray Creation Lab facing a giant exo head. Anna pops in. After some time, she realized that if Elsie went through that much trouble to protect her, then she must care at least a little. Of course, all Anna wants from Elsie now is to just act as her sister. I use the skeleton key. This activates the giant head, and it turns out that this is an AI version of Clovis Bray. Not much information is learned, but there was at least some interaction between all of the Brays. Unfortunately, part of why we learned no information is because the dialogue was not all that great. Clovis Bray being evil is known information, and the dialogue doesn't really go into detail into anything besides that. Yes, my chair snapping literally just, I fell backwards. Okay, irrelevant. I guess technically Anna and Elsie resolved their situation here, but it feels like there wasn't even that much drama in the first place, which doesn't seem correct. Am I missing something? Let me know. Back at camp, Elsie is incredibly grateful for all that we have done. With the power of friendship, we will defeat the darkness. This requires us to return back to Reese Reborn and commune with the same Crux for the 3rd time. Ugh. With that done, Elsie tasks us with investigating the appearance of entropic shards in the Well of Infinitude. Of course, we commune with the Crux, but this location was locked off from us at the very least. It's kind of a shame that Reese Reborn never really gets any more exploration besides this. Like, we know how, like, why are there no strikes or patrols or public events or Lost sectors in this area. Like, we never come back to this area, and it's like crazy detailed. It's wild. The last step in the aspect of Influence Quest requires us to complete the Heroic Exo Challenge. I think this is a harder version of the Vex simulation activity from earlier. I say I think because they call this Heroic, and that there's technically a difficulty option, and there are some champions. But calling this challenge difficult is not a word I would use to describe it. I wouldn't even use challenge as the word here. It's I mean, I guess it's technically a challenge, but you know what they say about technicalities. I don't know where I'm going. Regardless, we return back to the Zig and embrace the darkness once more. I'm not going over the rest of the aspect quest because who cares? Also, why am I doing an ASMR voice? Like, what is happening here? I'm so, hey guys, do you like this? Actually, I said it. Okay, we're cutting that out. Actually, I say that, but there is another Vex simulation. This one is interesting because it tries to use the wind as a mechanic, but since it doesn't really affect our jumps or do enough damage if we collect enough debuffs, it's more a mechanic in name only. The jumping sections are among the better ones I've encountered thus far though. By the way, if you actually embrace the darkness and kill yourself before the mission teleports you, you can actually stay inside the pyramid. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything to break in here. With that out of the way, the post Beyond Light stuff is pretty much done. Sure, I could open my Triumph list and go through every single Beyond Light activity, but who does that? Anyways, I decided to check out the seasonal activities since I had some downtime. Riven decided to create an echo of her lair using the memories between her and Mara. For this first section, we need to form a portal in order to escape the trapped room. This requires us to do some jumping and activate some plates. There is also a mechanic that caught me off the first time around, and that's the stacks of pervading darkness. If you collect 10 stacks, you fall over and die. I realized that something was going on because your screen gets covered in darkness. But the thing that got me though was that you have to stand in the light for a little bit longer than you would think. After activating the plates, we enter a room where we have to kill certain boss enemies and light the torches. After that, our goal is simply to survive the final wave. This takes us into another jumping section with the pervading darkness mechanic. With that over, we actually have to drop a raid banner before entering the following room. Enter Rollinger. Laid down to the terrace. It took me a couple of seconds to connect the dots, but this fight reminded me of the Vorgeth fight from the Shattered Throne dungeon. We have to dispatch the Ward Weavers first before dropping the main boss's shield. However, the pervading darkness debuff is much easier to deal with than the petitioner's marks. The fact that you don't have a timer, along with the main boss not being an ogre, plus the fact that I have 2 other teammates are all major factors in making this fight much easier. I didn't die once, so that should say something. Overall, this was a fun activity, but since I'm writing this after playing the extended The Coil seasonal mission, this was but an appetizer. At the Helm's holodeck, Osiris lets us know that an anomaly is casting a shadowing superposition across the veil, resonating with it. We don't know what it is, I especially don't know what it is, but it's drawing away the traveler's connection. Oh sure, co-opting the veil's place in their entanglement as if it were a doppelganger. Osiris has isolated the anomaly signal, and it's emanating directly from the Black Garden. That's a place I do know. The Soul Divisive must enact one final effort to our advance. Oh my god, if you saw the script right now, absolute zero spell checking or rewriting went into this. I cannot believe how poorly worded. Okay, if left unaddressed, we will be unable to follow Crow, which would force us to face the full fury of Marislav. It seems complicated at first, and that was a lot of words to say. Something is blocking the veil and the traveler's connection. Destroy it. Hopefully, future me will be able to understand the finer details.
Breach the garden and dispel whatever interference the Vex have erected there.
Petra contacts us right after with some bad news. Word from the Techians is that Riven's clutch has dispersed across the ley lines of the Ascendant Realm. They now orbit our reality like comets around the sun. The Techians don't know how this happened, but they detected a surge of paracausal energy across the entire transit system. This residual energy has allowed us to predict each egg's trajectory, which makes it seem like good news, not bad. Petra gets annoyed that we have to prostrate ourselves towards Riven yet again, but it's not like we have any other choice. In order to reroute the lines through Riven's lair, we have to enter into the Blind Well. I'm so glad I have to participate in a public event. At least they gave me some charges. Not that I've ever had to use any. I'm not going to go over my Blind Well runs. Go watch my previous videos for that if you care. And by previous videos, I mean, I think like the very first video where I accidentally entered the dreaming city and no idea what I was doing. Bad times, bad times. This unlocks step 5 of 55 in the mission, polysemi. The poly prefix is obvious and semi could have come from semantics, but I was still unsure of the meaning of the word. Polysemi is the coexistence of many possible meanings for a word or phrase. This no doubt ties into the overall theme of the Ahamkara and their witch magic. Mara and Savathun have some dialogue where Mara questions Riven's relationship with the Witch Queen. Even though their goals often align, Riven is clearly too self-serving to have done so. With that out of the way, let's talk about the mission. The platforming section is completely different and introduces obstacles along the way in the form of spikes and pushy wall things. This is cute, but once you know to look at the ground, they aren't too difficult to avoid. Funnily enough, this is probably more of a problem for more experienced FPS players because we've been conditioned to keep our crosshairs at head height. The fighting section consisted of us killing some Vex and using an Arc Cranium to destroy Vex nodes in order to release the Ogre from its prison. Pretty self-explanatory there. Another platforming section later, we have to place down another raid banner. Of course, somehow I triggered the event without the doors even opening. Thus I'm stuck until I'm forced to join my allies. Thanks for sticking me in this random corner where I'm stuck for a few seconds. Very cool. This boss fight is against a Hydra titled as an aspirational construct. It has its normal Hydra barrier, but it also has a second shield. By killing some majors, we can pick up an Arc Cranium to beam it down. This fight was going about as well as one could expect until I get detained. My super ran out while I was still in the process of left clicking, thus when I get detained, it switches to my last used weapon, which was my rocket launcher. Thus by left clicking in close quarters, I dropped myself to 1 HP, which allowed the Vex mobs to finish the job. The second time around, I realized that the rocket launcher was actually not all that useful in this fight, and switched over to a linear fusion rifle named the Doom Petitioner. The construct reaches its second phase, and teleports up to where I was standing, so I run all the way across the arena. I managed to drop a healing rift just in time for some supplicators to ram themselves on my ass. I literally didn't even see them coming, and they were too close to ending me. The construct goes down, and I pick up Riven's egg. We return to Mara, who compares Riven to a blade. Osiris continues the metaphor by saying that doubt is double-edged. Mara furthers her thoughts and brings up that this wish was crafted by Savathun. Riven might only be letting us in on what we want to hear. She then asks Osiris if the veil has given him any answers. Apparently, Osiris is able to understand how the witness opened the Traveler, but doesn't know how to replicate it. Unfortunately, he needs more time, which is something we don't have. Osiris could try to use our ghost to open up a passageway, but he has to be incredibly careful because if he uses the veil incorrectly, then it could lead to disaster. Yep, that's typically how MacGuffins tend to work. I return to Riven. She gives us further detail into her relationship with Riven. For ages, the Reef and Ahamkara were allies and adversaries. Riven knows that Mara doesn't trust her, but Riven knows that Mara is correct not to do so, as Riven has never trusted Mara in the first place either. They have simply made a trade offer. This completes the first week of the Wishing All the Best questline. This is also where we receive the Cotton to Coil questline, and where the Coil seasonal activity unlocks itself. Unfortunately, I wasted a bunch of wish engrams earlier, but this is where I finally noticed the arrow that led to a second page. I was elated upon finding out that I could focus my engrams on armor. That coveted 100% stat line is that much closer. It's even more unfortunate that I'm only 1 resilience point away. Tautology is a second mission, and is something I'm quite guilty of when it comes to my scripts. We enter Riven's lair, and she compares the Taken's influence to awoken royalty. Boom, got him. This mission has the same jumping puzzles from earlier, and when I had the light torches, I realized that I've already done this mission in Riven's lair earlier as well. For the boss, we have to dispatch the Ward Weavers first, but this time, Ungoloth, Wayward Beast, is an ogre. This makes it even more like the Vorgat fight, and since I'm solo, it does make it a bit harder. I still managed to not die though. I transmit the second egg to Riven, and Mara congratulates us, but complains about Riven forcing us to collect our eggs before granting Savathun's wish. Riven, of course, had her own words to say about that. In a small detail, she also says our proper class, and that's a nice touch to include. I attempted another Legend Lost sector as it knocked off a few things off my current checklist. This time, it was the Chamber of Starlight in the Dreaming City. Overall, this wasn't too bad of an experience outside of this one overload hobgoblin that just sits in the top back of the map of the main room with the boss. I only died to this one fuck over and over again. Like, seriously, bro, move! Why are you putting a champion on a sniper all the way in the back? What am I supposed to do against this? Okay, anyways. This managed to also knock out one of Riven's Wish's quests. Crow and Osiris have a heart-to-heart talk as he understands not being under control of his own body. Osiris was still under the influence of Savathun, and when Crow was Uldransov. I'll let the full dialogue play out.
Concern. But if we cannot rely upon the Veil, the Ahamkara is our only option.
Even if it was Savathun who pointed us at Riven in the first place?
The witness is our priority. We've dealt with Savathun and Riven in the past.
And now Savathun is free and Riven is toying with us. I won't end up as a puppet.
Nor I.
Sorry, I didn't mean...
I fear it's fear too. The experience of watching your body perform a series of actions you would never condone. That terrible regret. But that fear won't stop me. Just as I know it won't stop you.
Was any of it real? All that advice Savathun gave me while he pretended to be you.
At the time Aldrin began his campaign against the Reef, he was already suffering from the Black Garden's corruption. Riven must have found him an easy victim. One could argue he wasn't fully in of his decisions. All the same, the impact of those decisions was very real. So, let me ask you this. Did I give you good advice?
Life-changing.
Then hold on to it.
This was probably some of the best writing I've experienced thus far, although I can't help but wish Osiris and Crow were in the same room as us. Aldrin killed Crow due to Riven, and Crow is haunted by those actions, which is how they are able to connect. The important line here is when Osiris says that the impact of the decisions was very real. Osiris' follow-up line is also pretty good, as he asks Crow if he gave him good advice. This is referring to when he was controlled by Savathun, and right now as he talks to Crow. Not only that, the final line said by Crow is a cherry on top. Crow says that the advice Osiris gave him was life-changing. This is because Aldrin caused Cade's death, but his own as well, not to mention everything that has transpired thus far. In fact, him being resurrected by his ghost showed him of the identity of Uldransov. However, even though he is now the Crow, he has to live with the actions of his past self. This is quite literally life-changing. I got to hand it to whoever wrote these lines of dialogue because they knew what they were doing and they cooked. The meeting between Petra and Crow is also quite good. It's not as witty and clever as the previous dialogue with Osiris, but all of the dialogue in this game does not need to have layers upon layers of meaning within each line. They barely have any meaning in the first place. It makes sense for Osiris to be 3-0 IQ in his words, but this more straightforward approach between Petra and Crow fits more in line with their respective characters. Speaking of Osiris, through the holodeck, he lets us know that the Veil is the power of consciousness made manifest in our physical world. It whispers in electromagnetic language that resonates in our mind that can be deciphered, but not by the laws we wield in this universe. That's an interesting line and could mean many things. Is he referring to the fact that we will travel to a different timeline in order to figure out what the Veil really is? Maybe a different universe? Or is it that our power of light and darkness are not the correct tools of paracausality for this approach? This brings about the end of my adventures in the Season of Wish currently. Time to move on to the Witch Queen.
In times of crisis, people look to their leaders for answers. But ever since the planets were ripped from our sky, it seems all I can offer are more questions. And now, with Mars returned, I hardly know where to start. Where is she?
Your theory was correct. The relic is of the pyramids. There's no doubt.
Word is out about Mars.
I need more time.
The Cabal are mobilizing. We need to... Secure the camp!
Wait. It seems they have another target.
What are they aiming at?
Savathun.
Mars has apparently returned. Not that I knew it was missing in the first place. Obviously, an entire planet in our system just popping back into existence is a major deal. Ikora herself is shocked at the situation and heads to Mars to meet up with Eris. They discovered a relic that's linked with the pyramids, but its purpose is still unknown. Of course, us Guardians aren't the only ones that arrive on scene. The Cabal have arrived with a giant battering ram, but contrary to our expectations, they have another target. Enter Savathun. This is easily the best start to any campaign we have gotten so far. Not only have we established our primary villain, but we've also introduced another faction into the mix. Along with those objectives, a couple of mysteries have also been introduced. What happened to Mars? Why is it back? And what is up with the Relic Eris was messing with? Not only that, but Ikora also being confused at what is happening allows us to relate to her situation and immerse ourselves into the story that much more. And of course, the visuals are still insane. The design of Savathun's flagship is striking, and its lucent white sheen stands in stark contrast to most of every other environment I've seen in Destiny 2 thus far, let alone the orangeness of Mars. With that done, we are able to select between difficulty options in the campaign for the first time. Destiny 2's combat at the base untuned difficulty is embarrassingly easy. Even if you have never touched an FPS game, there is no challenge. You can barely even use your abilities because everything just dies so fast, and nothing can even threaten your life. So, being able to experience a more challenging campaign is a nice change of pace. I hope in the future that they will add more difficulty options to the campaigns, even if it is just capping our light level lower and lower. I know that this isn't true difficulty and people will complain about artificial difficulty in this, as, you know, real difficulty comes from like the mechanics, but I would like to play a harder version of the game at the very least. Difficulty options are not a revolutionary concept, and it is crazy that it took this long before Destiny finally implemented them into the campaign. Like seriously, how? Regardless, after selecting the legend difficulty, I'm taken into orbit before the mission can officially begin. We arrive at Afrascot 24A in Mars, in some sort of crop field. Some odd blue patches of darkness contaminate the ground. Ikora and Eris are together and are working on establishing hidden operations near the cradle. Eris fills us in that the odd patches are a side effect of Mars returning with temporal instabilities. An entire planet reappearing in our system no doubt drew Savathun out from hiding, even in her weakened state. I would like to know what caused Savathun to retreat in the first place, but that is left unanswered. Ikora lets us know that our end goal is to board Savathun's flagship, and in order to do so first, we must first fight through the Cabal blocking our way. I started blasting, and some pop-ups decide that now is the best time to give us the tutorial on how energy weapons work. I actually had no idea that using the same energy weapon type on a matching enemy shield created an elemental explosion. It's just that reading while shooting and moving is a little bit harder than it first seems. By the way, I can already feel the bump up from the legendary difficulty as I actually had to switch to a special weapon when dealing with a yellow bar. Oh yeah, I didn't actually have to switch it, but you know, it felt more appropriate to do so, especially when I got the tutorial to pop up. This Cabal in particular drops a fuel canister that powers an energy launcher. As we glide down, we're able to take a better look at the giant cannon the Cabal are setting up. After taking care of the group outside, we were able to head inside and allow our ghost to hack the console. It's here that he decides to answer one of my questions. Apparently, Savathun went into hiding thanks to Morozov. This clarifies the power hierarchy a bit more, but now I want to know how Morozov accomplished such a feat. Our ghost's following line also clues us in on the timeline. Mara injured Savathun relatively recently, so Savathun showing up so soon seems reckless for a ghost, especially since she's the god of cunning. Clearly something is up, but nobody, not even Ikora or Eris, knows what. Everyone being clueless only adds to the absolute chaos caused by the return of Mars. While I appreciate Ghost's line as a new player, if I already know what's up, I wouldn't be surprised if these lines added to the noise of how often characters like to repeat information. Our ghosts gather enough information and gives us our next goal. What we have to do is not exactly a surprise, but why do we have to do all of the setup? What have the Cabal been doing this entire time, if not preparing the cannon? Surely they didn't just drop it in for fun. In any case, we kill some Cabal and pick up a wrench in order to open a fuel line. While not the most complex of mechanics, having smaller goals other than just killing things helps break up the monotony and provide a sense of progression. With the cannon now receiving fuel, we can begin activating the generators. As we approach the control room, our ghost continues to point out some valid concerns. Why is the god of cunning showing up with a giant ship? If the ship is the red flag and we're the bull, why is Savathun even holding such flag to taunt us? By the way, this was my first death so far, and yes, it was to me sliding off the sloped edge. Amazing. I fall down and enter Agra Sector 24A in the Freehold. It's here where we are introduced to campaign banners. These are like raid banners, but for the campaign. And the fact that I had to place one down immediately let me know that shit was about to go down. With our ghost no longer being able to revive us, I had to make sure to play it safer than normal, or else I would have to restart this encounter. We still need to reach the control room, and that requires us to obtain 2 goods from some engineers in order to override the control room. This encounter was pretty normal, but I got a little overzealous when fighting the second engineer. Legendary mode removes your radar, and I was just used to looking at it in order to figure out where enemies even were. This, in combination of not really being used to having to play safely in this game, caused some Cabals to flank me. Normally, this wouldn't have been an issue, but since this is the legendary campaign, even the normal trash mobs are able to deal damage to me. Thus, the Imperial Engineer's Stomp dropped my HP, and actually led to my second death in the campaign. Now that I gained a knowledge of how many Cabals actually spawn and where they tended to group up, I could play safer and more aggressively the second time around. I also decided to not troll too hard and pulled out my rocket launcher to finish the job. While some enemies swarm us at the end, this is the end of the encounter. While this was a fairly standard encounter, knowing that there would be future banner sections like this was a real change that let me know that this wasn't like the previous campaigns. We take the elevator up. Our ghost lets us know that he's styled marching orders from Keitel, who wants to retake Mars' Cabal territory while hacking the system. I'm not sure who Keitel is, but that doesn't sound like a good thing. We realign the cannon. Our ghost lets us know that we'll be fine, but he'll be on standby to revive us. Even though it's just a throwaway line, I appreciate the fact that this gameplay mechanic was actually mentioned in the story. While managing our way through the catwalks, our ghost continues to voice his concerns. No Guardian has ever made their way into Savathun's ship before, and trying to figure out her intentions is driving our ghost mad. My first thought was that Savathun is here because of the return of Mars. Us boarding her ship would just be another one of the kooky ideas of us causing some mayhem. Since our ghost keeps on bringing this point up though, I highly doubt that Mars' injury caused Savathun to lose brain cells, and instead she's trying to goad us to board it. It would be cool if we could make the choice if we actually wanted to get on the ship, but you know, the narrative team needs their jobs and I probably would not be not wanting to get on it in the first place. The flagship looked massive from the ground, and stepping onto it only confirmed its size even further. Getting a closer look reveals more of the sharp-edged Geiger-like aesthetic. The absolute sense of scale Destiny displays is second to none. It continues to amaze me every time. Some splotches of void light stain the ground, which leads our ghost in for Ikora. Ikora obviously questions this, because we should be the only Guardians to have ever stepped onto Savathun's flagship. While Ikora thinks we acted too hastily, Eris reassures her. In what I think is an excellent line, Eris knows that Savathun is far too crafty of an individual, and if we were to wait to know what she had in store for us, we would wait forever. I can't help but agree. Trying to outsmart the god of cunning is likely not the smartest of plans we could come up with. Facing the tribulations head-on, though, at least gives us the chance of brute forcing our way through. Ikora obviously says that we wouldn't wait forever, just until her and Eris could meet up with us to be some backup. Of course, our ghost doesn't think we should pass up this opportunity though, and I can't help but agree. The evening-like lighting makes this one hallway look insanely epic for no particular reason, but I'm not complaining. After crossing a few tight hallways, we officially enter the lure. I know our ghost was questioning Savathun's intentions, but you can't just call the ship the lure. We gotta be a little bit more subtle than that. Like sure, our ghost heavily implied that this is a trap, but you know, at least make me feel like we aren't walking directly into Savathun's arms. Although, I'm not gonna, we'll get to that later. As we cross another epic hallway, a lone acolyte surrounded in a white shimmer steps into our view. It dies without much fanfare, but upon death, a blue-tinted moth escapes from the acolyte's body. Funnily enough, as I went to melee this night, the moth lines up and allows me to hit a melee collateral. Our ghost then points out said moth. This is where the wheels of my mind started to spin, and the acolyte having non-corrupted light is indeed a cause for concern. However, I don't get much time to actually think about what just happened, as I have to place down another campaign banner. This area is exposed to the outside and seems to be some sort of landing bay, as numerous ships drop some hive off. I start the encounter by killing a lone acolyte in the distance. This alerts the rest of the hive. Immediately, a bunch of thralls start to close in on my location, forcing me to jump around all over the place. My Verglaw's curve is able to generate stasis crystals after each kill. This compensates for the otherwise slow clear speed of the bow when it comes to groups of mobs. While our objective is to find Savathun, we have to collect 5 tributes before being able to dispel the barrier on the door to move forward. Obtaining these tributes is done by killing specific tribute named enemies. With the burden of tribute buff, we can deposit it by standing in the circle near the barrier. From behind cover, I kill some acolytes and knock out the shield of the Revenant Wizard. I could stay in cover, but since it's an orange bar, I decided to close the distance since my special weapon was a shotgun. However, the pillar hid a second wizard. I panicked and used my charged melee attack in order to freeze them. Of course, this ends in failure simply because my character is right-handed, and penumbral blasts straight into the corner of this wall. If my freeze did go off, I could have fully focused on the already damaged wizard while avoiding a significant amount of damage, but because I failed, my terrible position left me with no cover. I wasn't able to draw my healing rift fast enough, and since I was animation locked, the wizard's darkness blast was able to knock me out. I don't know if it would have mattered though. While the line of success was quite clear, I didn't let myself get caught up on my failure. Sure, I could have frozen that wizard and probably have been fine. In the future, I wouldn't always be able to do so. So, while in the short term this attempt was a failure, I was still able to learn something from this mistake. Now that I know that there are 2 wizards, they both go down so I can end this section the second time around. We collect our loot, and Ghost continues its line of thought from before the encounter. This obviously is a confusing turn of events, and finding Savathun was probably the only way we were going to receive any answers. Since the enemies could now actually damage me, getting close to them was only that much worse of an option. So I went ahead and switched my special weapon from the Bone Chiller shotgun to the harsh language waveframe grenade launcher. Wellspring and Disruption Break aren't the best of perk rolls, but I had no idea what good rolls even were at the time, and I didn't think it would even really matter for the campaign in the first place. As we head deeper into the lure, the lighting shifts from a warm orange hue to a much harsher and colder blue. We see some thrall in the distance, which lets us know where we need to go. However, there is a metal fence in our way that we can't destroy for no particular reason. Thus, we're forced to find a different pathway that leads us forward. Technically, a void blink jump should have led us through, but the limitations of the game systems unfortunately held us back. Some motes of light almost kill us, but we find our way to the statue that gave our ghost some weird vibes. The top half of the statue appears to have been destroyed, leaving us only with some legs. We pick up the artifact of the Black Fleet, which is obviously pyramid technology. This leads our ghost to question why it's in Savathun's ship. And out of all the questions presented to us thus far, this one is fairly easy. In fact, it would be more suspicious if Savathun had no interest in Black Fleet technology. We continue our trek and are taken back outside before heading deeper into the ship. Our ghost is keeping itself busy and discovers that there were reports of Savathun trying to capture void light from dead guardians. Perhaps she was studying the void this entire time, and much like how we are now able to wield the darkness through stasis, she is able to wield the light through the power of the void. We drop down the Dunasi hole into a fuchsia-lit corridor. The highly detailed and cross-stitched walls are segmented, and within multiple embossed columns, some sort of energy spews out, illuminating the room. There are 3 diamond-like crystals inside the columns. The top and bottom crystals are purple, while the middle crystal is a scarlet red. This middle crystal also juts out and moves sporadically, much like a twitching eye. There is no explanation to what we are looking at, so it's left up to me to make the conjecture that these crystals are being drained in order to power the ship. As we continue forward, we pass through a walkway which masterfully keeps our eyes centered while exposing us to the beautiful central room of the ship. We manage to catch Savathun walking through the portal, but of course, it is locked from us. While I'm trying to immerse myself in the moment, a knight pops in to kill our vibe. Of course, it isn't any regular knight. It starts the encounter by throwing a suppression grenade behind us. I only just managed to see the nade as I turn around, but since I have nowhere to go in order to avoid it, I am sent to critical health immediately. The Hive Lieutenant officially wields the light, but I'm chilling with the darkness now. I shatter the Lieutenant, and upon death, it drops a ghost? No, that can't be quite right. And so our ghost takes this moment to get a better look. Unfortunately, as we get closer, our fears are confirmed. Upon death, the Lightbearer Knight did indeed drop a ghost. In a burst of shock, frustration, and confusion, our ghost questions why this ghost in particular is helping the Hive. A good question indeed. I clearly have no idea how to use a wayframe launcher and try to hit the knight with the grenade itself. This deals no damage, and so I have to hard lean on my rocket launcher. I get a good look at the Hive ghost the second time around, and am actually able to finish the ghost off, destroying it in the process. As we crush the shell, it still takes us a few more seconds in order to truly process what we've just done. We just destroyed a ghost, a Hive ghost, but a ghost nonetheless. This is a shocking turn of events, and our ghost is having a hard time understanding how this could have happened. We have to keep on going though, and in order to break the seal on the transportation rift, we have to collect 3 tributes. I don't notice the raid banner at all, and immediately initiate the counter. I walk backwards while trying to manage the acolytes, and due to not knowing the layout of this area, I end up falling to my death. This makes it the 4th one. And yes, I know it says 6 on the scoreboard, but 2 of them were while I was trying to explode a ship and don't count. I respawn and realize that this is another campaign banner encounter, so I should not get it twisted. This combat area is rather large, so maintaining your distance and not dying to enemies is pretty easy. Just be careful to not blow yourself up. Surely this won't become a reoccurring issue. Anyway, after killing a knight, wizard, and then ogre, we have obtained enough tributes in order to continue our pursuit. We jump through and are hit with a loading screen. This takes us into a fortified location that resembles the lure stylistically, although it is less Geiger-esque and more gothic in nature. Some sort of white marbled material with a tinge of turquoise light green acts as the base material, with striking red flora and ornaments helping to accent the landscape. Our ghost questions what this place is and notes that it doesn't look like a Hive throne world, but I don't think those have a template on what they're supposed to look like. Where we are supposed to go is left unclear, but the giant ogre is almost certainly a clue. I make my way past the barrier, and Savathun herself talks to us. Well, I say talk to us, but in reality, she simply asks us a question. I mean, I felt nothing, but obviously her question is meant to prod a little deeper into the whole psychology of us destroying a ghost. In-game, we didn't really hesitate to finish the ghost off. Besides, it was a Hive ghost, so it doesn't really count as a ghost. Don't worry, as a human, I can confirm that discrimination is one of our strong suits. I kill not that many Hive before Savathun, the Witch Queen, reveals herself. Our ghost notes that we are indeed strong, but that fight was too easy. As we try to open up our chest, we become threadbound and Savathun reveals herself and her 2 projections.
Guardian, do you read me? We're here, Ikora. We're back on Mars. Back? From where?
Savathun's throne world.
I know, we should have checked in, but we had Savathun in our sights. That might have been our only shot at her, we couldn't miss it. I understand completely. It's not like Savathun to allow herself to be seen so easily.
There's something else. Before we left the ship, we ran into one of her knights. And it...
It had a ghost, Ikora. Same as any other light bearer.
A ghost. A hive knight with a ghost. But that means
Savathun stole the light. But that's impossible, isn't it?
impossible. With Savathun, nothing is impossible.
Savathun, the Witch Queen, hive god of cunning and lies. Hive legend tells us she was born on a hostile, far-off planet, where she would have lived a short, uneventful life, if it weren't for the worm familiar that warned of an impending cataclysm. And so, she led her siblings into the depths, where the ancient worm gods offered them immeasurable power in exchange for endless blood tribute. From this, the Hive were born, and countless civilizations were condemned to extinction. For untold ages, they devoured life and light wherever it could be found, facing little resistance, until they tried to take on the Guardians. After the death of her brother Oryx, Savathun went into hiding. Not out of fear, of course, but out of strategy. Because Savathun knows the best way to beat your enemy is to join them. In her greatest trick yet, she infiltrated the Vanguard, weakening us from within, and stealing our most sacred resource, the one thing we thought she could never touch, the light.
We inform Ikora of the situation at hand, but I don't know why this was done in cutscene form when all we needed was 2 lines over the radio. Seems like a waste of resources. The black and white cutscene of Savathun's origin story is told to us from Ikora's perspective. This not only looks sick, well, not eating much into the budget, but also helps catch us up to speed. Apparently, the Hive didn't just exist like they do now. Savathun would have been just another no-name, but her worm familiar warned her about an impending cataclysm. This led Savathun to head into the depths of some location where the ancient worm gods offered them immeasurable power in exchange for endless blood tribute. Tends to be like that when you're doing some sort of spooky ritual to ancient worm gods, you know? If there wasn't going to be an endless blood tribute, could you really have gotten real power, you know? And thus, the Hive were born. This was some insane lore to drop on us just like that. However, this is all Hive myth, and no doubt parts of it have been obfuscated and mystified in order to bolster the legend. But it does raise a lot of questions. Her worm familiar has some relation to the worm gods, but it's left unclear to us where Savathun got it from and what it really even is in the first place. How did the worm even know about said catastrophe, and why did it warn Savathun? We are left in the dark. Savathun also managed to take over Osiris and enter the Vanguard in disguise. After that discovery is most likely when she was injured by Marsov. This story was most likely explored in the seasons following Beyond Light, but as someone who is not able to play those seasons, they might as well not exist because they don't exist in the game. Like, there's literally no mention of the seasons existing. No cutscenes, no dialogue besides whatever dialogue we have here now. It's kind of wild. I wish at the very least I could watch those cutscenes in game, but no, I have to figure out what the post Beyond Light seasons even were before knowing what cutscenes to even watch. So while the story is fairly connected, if you can only play the campaigns, a lot of detail is left unknown. The writers do their best to catch everyone up, which leads to some repetition in dialogue, which is either good or bad depending on how you look at it, but they can only do so much when they have a much more important story to tell. We return to Ikora, but she doesn't say anything of note, and instead is just reflecting on the events that have occurred. We head back to the Relic with the Black Fleet fragment. Say that 300 times fast. I don't know why I chose 300, just let's go 3 times fast. That's a little bit more reasonable. After the cutscene plays, we are granted access to the Relic. This basically acts as our tutorial for weapon crafting. Weapon crafting is not exactly how I imagined it to be. I expected us to have to acquire certain weapons with certain perks in order to craft them, but but it's a lot more streamlined than that. Whether or not that's a good thing is something I can't really make a full judgment on because I barely interacted with the system. With weapon crafting officially unlocked, I went ahead and finished up some of the Season of the Wish quest that would grant wish fragments so I could pick up enough red border apex predators. And yes, I did realize that you have to jump onto the energy pool with the Farseer relic in hand in order to make the required remaining jumps. I just completed that part of the quest and thus didn't bother doing it over and over again. Also, apologies for any sped up footage or audio you might experience. I ran out of space multiple times on my hard drives and had to record a video of the actual raw footage in order to save space. I wasn't going to stay on my computer doing nothing for several hours, so I sped up the footage to 2x speed for my own sake. Slowing down the video messes the audio up hard, so I have to stay in 2x. This should only be an issue for the next mission. 1 hour of footage at the quality I recorded in is around 60 gigs of storage, so you can figure out how this quickly gets out of hand. Even though YouTube's compression drastically drops the quality, I still want the videos to not look like a mess of pixels, so I'd appreciate it if you dropped a like to help me out. In any case, I obtained enough wish tokens to purchase 5 red border apex predators, so I was able to craft one with reconstruction and bait and switch. I also went ahead and farmed the Perdition Lost Sector on Master a couple of times. Okay, a lot of times. It was Glove Day and I was trying to get a pair of Osmiomancy gloves in order to better match my stasis build. This, unfortunately, did not end up panning out. However, I did get a bunch of other gloves. I was originally going to use the Controverse holds in order to void bomb people, but the sun bracers looked pretty sick. And as I searched all of them up on YouTube, I learned that the sun bracers were actually getting nerfed in the final shape. So you know I had to do it to them. Besides changing Ikora stash to heat rises and changing my nades from whatever to solar, I didn't worry about anything else. For my mod situation, I still didn't bother even changing anything out because I'm not concerned in trying to figure out that whole system at this time. I did swap from my Stasis Virgil's Curve bow to the Solar Kigu's Divination bow as well. I obtained this bow from the exotic memorial thing at the tower along with the rest of the exotic bows that I could obtain at the time, if you were curious. That's the end of this first part. Part 2 will come out in 2 days. See you then. Good night.